With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Look, I think strike rate's very, very overrated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strike Rate, the cricket analytics podcast, where we're going to be talking about the value of good bowling in T20 franchise cricket. I'm Jack Hope, and I'm joined by Dan Weston. Dan, how are you doing today? We're 5 games into the IPL. It's like cricket Christmas for those who are into cricket and analytics. It's been a great start, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been. It's been full of talking points. I've really enjoyed it. The double header at the first weekend has just been epic. Obviously, we've got a chance to see every team now once. Second time today for Punjab Kings and RCB. And I think already we're seeing these frailties of roster construction and just the squad composition for certain teams, which I think has been a big theme and reason as to why we're focusing on this topic today.
So I mean, we'll be talking about bowling. We'll be talking about what makes good bowlers be good. We'll talk about how constructing a team with good bowlers makes you a lot more likely to qualify for the playoffs in the IPL and in other franchise tournaments, and picking up your questions in part 2 or a bit later in the show. Anyway, Dan, I'm actually going to start with a question today. And this came from Saoirse, who tweeted at us and said, might be a bit obvious, but how on earth have Delhi Capitals ended up with 0 overseas bowlers in their 11? Now, you also tweeted about this, and you've written a Substack article on this topic. And I think it's a good entry point into the rest of the discussion. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, right, where do we get started? First of all, if anyone wants to read the thoughts in detail, you can do it on Substack, which is danweston.substack.com. Now, having been present in the 2022 mega auction, I observed what I perceived to be something of a kind of random scattergun strategy from DC about their auction purchases. They actually bid on, I'm pretty sure, if it wasn't the most, it was one of the most players in the entire auction, which kind of shows to me that they didn't really kind of have. Well, fixed targets are never a good idea, but having like a coherent idea of who they wanted, they were just bidding on a lot of players. So it felt to me that their roster construction was not particularly focused, basically. And then we go into the tournament this year, and you know, on paper it's not bad. Like in terms of their overseas bowlers, Nortje, Jai Richardson, and Ngidi, and then. I mean, Nortje would walk into most teams if he's fully fit. But the problem is he hasn't been fully fit. He's been out since, I think, September and had just come back into domestic cricket. And he's just had a new child as well, which I think was the reason why he's late for this tournament. But all of these things could have been predicted in advance of the retentions. Like it's not new news that Norkia had a long-term injury. It's not new news that Jai Richardson is injury prone. It's probably news that Ngidi was injured, but then
it's not new news. It's not new news that Norkia's wife was pregnant. Like I don't know.
Not. Probably not. I mean, Hazelwood was swerved at the auction for a similar reason. And look, I think that with Ngidi, actually, it's the worst mistake of the whole lot because he was injured later on in the process. So there's no problem with the draft strategy there with him, but they replaced him with a batter. They already had 4 overseas batters. And then that's Jake Fraser-McGurk, who's a massive talent. Honestly, the people that I know cricket speak so highly of this kid. Yeah, he's going to be really, really good. But 1, you don't need any more batters. And 2, they didn't even pick him. And they picked Shai Hope, who they shouldn't have even picked up at the auction anyway. I mean, how on earth you reach a decision to release Phil Salt and then pick up Shai Hope? I mean, the mind boggles.
So let's zoom out, as it were, and get to the big question that I introduced the show with. Like, why is having a good bowling attack important in franchise cricket? Like, what does it achieve?
Okay, so it achieves the fact that your batters are not under consistent pressure to start with. We talk about RCB this year, the home ground of the Chinnaswamy, with their what I perceive to be a mediocre bowling attack, particularly mediocre spin bowling attack. They're going to be their batters are going to be under huge pressure, and they're probably going to be under even more pressure if Virat Kohli keeps scoring like 20 off 20 like he did the other day on those kind of innings, and that's a starting point. And secondly, I think most importantly, if you go through the data for every tournament, basically ever, you will find that the qualifying teams all cluster around the same area pretty much. There's a massive correlation between how good you are as a bowling attack and qualification. It's probably one of the biggest factors in terms of qualification. The old cliche is batters win matches and bowlers win tournaments, and I think the data definitely kind of bears that one out. Batters get all the man of the matches pretty much. Like, I mean, we saw was it Sai Sudarshan got man of the match yesterday? Like,
yeah,
how? And then the bowlers just win these tournaments, and like basically, there's never, or very, very rarely, will a team have such a bad bowling attack as MI did in 2023. And I'm not saying that subjectively, I'm saying that statistically. They went at like 9.6 and over the economy to wickets at just under 20 balls per wicket. That's not good. But very, very rarely do teams have that data and qualify from tournaments. And you can say that in the IPL, you can say that in any league, basically. This is the research that I've done over a long period of time. Suggests that if you don't have a better than average bowling attack, you are screwed.
So can I talk about what that means? Like, what metrics are we looking at for the bowling unit as a whole when we're saying you need to be good? Like, let's benchmark this.
Yeah, so I've got benchmarks here for the IPL. As a team, you need to look at an economy rate over the season of around 8.7 or below, and balls per wicket, you're looking at 19 or below. Those two are the kind of magic figures where all the qualifying teams the last couple of years, apart from Mumbai last season, they all clustered in that group. Now, obviously, those figures are going to depend on the leagues. In a high-scoring league like the Blast, you might actually kind of have similar numbers. In the Big Bash, it's where the boundaries are big and the batters, I think, play with lower intent. Actually, you're probably going to be looking at slightly different figures that are going to be lower than that. But on the whole, in the IPL, that's the thing. So how does that then translate into recruitment? Well, I built a expected run prevention and production model ahead of the 2022 mega auction. So actually, there were ways that you can quantify this to show the bowlers whose expectation is around or below those figures. And bearing in mind, obviously, that spinners go for less runs and take wickets slightly less frequently than pacers do because of the phases that they bowl in. But you can benchmark qualification success for spinners, and you can benchmark qualification success for pacers if that's what you want to do too. There's a lot of detail that you can go into, that's for sure. And so, yeah, that can translate into recruitment. I think we've got some questions about that later on, about the recruitment side of things and how you adjust from league to league. And I think that's a really good question. But on the whole, if you have a team bowling attack that doesn't produce those numbers in the IPL or better, you are in big trouble.
Yeah, so a question that I think a lot of people will be kind of asking to follow up on this. Well, there's two questions, and I'll ask them one by one to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Does your bowling success not really tied to your batting? In other words, like if your batting economy rate is above 9, don't you really just need to be bowling an economy below 8.9 to be successful, like Mumbai did last year? Is there maybe a bias in here because of that?
Not so much. Okay, so actually, I look at it. You looked at it in terms of kind of like a net runs per over.
Yeah.
And that's a really good metric to look at. The other metric that I look at is net boundary percentage. And so if you, as a team, score 1% or more than your opposition over the season, you've got a really good chance of qualification. If you score 1% or less, minus 1% or worse, less than your opposition over the course of a season, you've got a very low chance of qualification. And anything much under that is like virtually zero. Now, the one thing I notice when I consistently go through this for teams in different leagues is that the teams who don't qualify, who have a net boundary percentage of better than 1, actually are pretty much all batting-oriented teams. So the variance is a lot higher for batting-oriented teams than it is for bowling-oriented teams. You basically never see a bowling-oriented team have a net boundary percentage of 1 or more and not qualify.
Okay, so you're saying like you can do what I was trying to explain, but the chances of it coming off are lower than if you focus on bowling as your priority. Yeah.
Exactly. So a strong bowling attack has a little bit more correlation to qualification success than the a strong batting attack.
So to follow up that, then wouldn't playing at a home venue where runs are suppressed be a huge advantage here? Like, or would that not bias the data in some way?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like every venue is different. You know, like the Chinnaswamy is different to the Chipawk, to use kind of two extreme examples, and I think that's a factor as well. Now, yes, I do agree that having a road with tiny boundaries massively increases the variance involved in matches. Because let's say, for example, every team in the IPL, we know that there are, even if the worst teams, there are 2 or 3 players in that team that if they have a day out with the bat, they could potentially take the game away from you. And having a road with small boundaries increases that possibility. So it's not productive to smoothing out variance basically over the course of a season. So if you want to go into this in much more detail, you can certainly look at performances versus your position at different venues and stuff like that as well, because that is important. But on the whole, like the correlation is still there. And you know, even a team at RCB who generally play on batting friendly conditions still got to play 7 away games.
Yeah. That is true. So Dan, I've got a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up this part, and we'll get to the questions we got from the audience. When it comes to actually constructing this good bowling attack, if you're thinking about this from a recruitment point of view, and you've got X amount of money or X amount of draft picks to spend on building this team, how do you spread them across a bowling unit? So say you want your five you want your 5 bowlers, or you want your 4 bowlers plus 2 all-rounders, and then you want a backup. Like, what's the thought process here for constructing that, and how many of them do you want to be like elite, I guess, and how many would you kind of settle for being slightly below average but maybe not awful?
Okay, so I think first of all, it's important to differentiate between domestic and overseas players in this conversation, because domestically there's not enough quality to go around 10 teams, and that's the case in pretty much most leagues. So that the 100, for example, like, you know, the recruitment conversations are probably not much different either. The fact is that the domestic market for paces is quite thin, and there's not enough to go around 8 teams. So that factors into your decision. Do you have to pay for the best overseas pacers? Yeah, you probably do. Do you have to try and stock up on domestic pacers if you can, who are at least got high potential? Probably you do. We've seen RR do that. I think now they've got kind of a cartel of domestic pacers, I should say, and that's sort of actually is a really good strategy, I think, because it starves the market of options, and it has a game theory impact on other teams' strategies. Because if you've got, say, there's like 15 good domestic pacers and you've got 7 of them, then that inflates the prices of the 8 other ones because there's more competition for those 8 in the auction environment. So that's a good strategy. So yeah, looking at it domestically, and because of that lack of domestic supply, we have to have demand for overseas paces. And I think that this goes back to the DC pace bowling conversation about the fact that, you know, they didn't have a frontline overseas pacer. I don't classify Mitch Marsh as that. Yes, he bowled 4 overs, but I think if you've got 100 crore to buy a cricket team and you use Mitch Marsh for 4 overs, something's gone wrong. I think that's especially if you do it on a regular basis, that is a big problem. And as a first change bowler, I mean, he's like a 6th bowler at best, really, at this level. And for the first change bowler, that's extremely problematic. So yeah, you've got to supplement your domestics with overseas. I think that's really, really important. And you go into the teams and you look at how many of them have overseas paces, and it's commonplace, you know. And then from there, you've got to look at phase suitability. So you've got to cover all your phases. There's no good picking four death bowlers and leaving your power play completely open to attack from the opposition, because no one's got ability to bowl the lengths and the sort of style that's needed in the power play. You've got to have specialists. So the impact sub also allows for a little bit more flexibility in this way. But we haven't really seen it yet, but maybe there's scope even for like a power play specialist, like a Deepak Chahar or an Ishant Sharma or someone like that, to go and bowl 4 overs straight through and then get subbed off for a bowler who can bowl middle and back. That would actually be really interesting to see. So you've got to have bowlers who fit the phases. It's really, really important. Role clarity. That's kind of a buzzword in cricket a little bit, and that's definitely true. Like players who understand their roles. How do we fit them into a coherent starting team that adheres to their super strengths, gives them their best chance of showcasing their abilities, rather than putting them in a position where they're more likely to fail, basically.
And then the final question. So we know that there's a difference between the economy rate of seam bowlers and spin bowlers. Why don't teams bowl loads more spin? Because spin has a lower economy rate. If what you're saying is true, like, is that just a failure of strategy, or is there more to this?
A bit. I do think that spin could be bowled more in like the death overs, for example, where teams are quite reticent to bowl spin. The problem I think that teams have with bowling spin at the death is that there's greater volatility for it. So, you know, there's probably more chance of multi-boundary overs coming off spin than there is off pace at the death. But I do agree, in certain matchups, like you've got batters who are really good against spin at the death, like against pace, like a Tim David and a David Visa as well. You would throw into this Carlos Brathwaite. I know he's not playing in the IPL this year, but they've got clear differences in their pace and spin ability, basically. And we saw Tim David yesterday, and Tilak Varma was turning down singles to him.
I mean, that was bonkers, but
yeah. But then the graphic came up on the TV and showing that Tim David has really struggled against leg spin in the IPL.
Yeah, but he's faced. I did some research into this. He'd faced 30 balls. If you're turning down singles with 4 overs to go to keep Tim David off strike based on 30 balls of data, I'd venture that you're an idiot. Basically, like if you look at Tim David in other leagues, he is weaker against leg spin, but he still averages like 25 at 150. Like it. What's the worst case scenario there? He gets out like a dot ball and a wicket. At that stage in the game, there wasn't that much difference in the value. No. And to reject a run. But anyway, that's a tangent, and we don't need to go down that.
And actually, if on the sort of some points related to that, though, quickly, if they're so worried about Tim David against Rashid Khan, why didn't they send in Hardik Pandya instead?
Well, yeah, exactly. Absolutely ludicrous.
I don't suppose for 1 minute that Tilak Varma has done his own independent research and found out that Tim David has really struggled against leg spin in the IPL. So either he's got supreme confidence in his ability, or he's been kind of told to do that. And either of them are probably not ideal. Can you only imagine that? Like, you know, he's on like a quick metric or something like that. He has an optimum strategy for his team.
He looked it up in the strategic timeout. He got his iPhone out, much like that you're allowed.
Got a little note in his pocket.
Yeah. Anyway, do you want to finish off on spin v seam, and then we'll do the question?
Yeah. So I do think that with certain players there is an argument to bowl a lot more spin to them at the death. The problem is that spin bowlers tend not to be that comfortable in doing that. So what you tend to see more is, like, for example, the Rashid Khan OVS, there was over 17, and that's the 17th is probably broadly is about as far as a spinner will go into an innings. But I think that the certain spinners do have the skill set to do that, and actually it's not a bad process at all in terms of going a bit of a different angle strategically. Power play as well. Like in the IPL, I think I've seen a lot of reticence to bowl spin in the power play, and actually against certain batters is probably not a bad strategy. You're playing RCB and you've got Kohli and du Plessis opening. If you've got a left arm spinner that's comfortable bowling in the power play, it's probably not a bad option.
Yeah.
So
all right, then we're going to take a quick break. Just before we do, a reminder to people to click that like and subscribe button so that you are updated when we deliver future episodes. We drop a new episode every Tuesday on a new topic, and if you want to get involved on social media, find us. I'm at Jack Hope 0 and Dan is at SA Advantage, and you can ask questions to us there. Be back in a moment.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strike Rate, the Cricket Analytics podcast. As I was saying before the break, make sure you're clicking like and subscribe. Help us grow our audience. We had a record week last week, Dan. We've had a record week every week, which is good. Like we're trending in the right direction. We want to keep that momentum up, and the way we do that is by asking very kindly that people who are listening spread the word. We've had some really nice tweets out from people who have shared the podcast. So if you're one of those, big thank you to you. And if you weren't, why not? What are you doing? Help us out here. Dan, this is the part of the show where we get to our listeners' questions. We had some really good ones in this week. So thanks everyone for engaging with the topic and sending us some really insightful things to think about. We're going to start with Random Cricket Stats, who says, with the IPL team seemingly looking to attack the power play more than ever before, have high-level power play bowlers become more valuable than ever before? So we're talking about phases. You actually gave an answer about this earlier in the show. Do you want to dive in on power play bowlers specifically?
Yeah, I do. I think historically, actually, there's been less correlation in the IPL between power play success and death success. However, I think that this will potentially change, or has changed a little bit with the impact sub, where basically the value of getting teams, to use a cliche, 3 down in the power play has less value now that there is an impact sub. And compared to, say, like in the Big Bash, if a team's like 40-3 after the power play, they're in big trouble. And yeah, there's a big difference between that and in the IPL right now. But we've also seen the implementation this year, and I do want to talk about this separately at some point, is of the 2 bouncer rule in the IPL. Now, generally speaking, success in the power play comes from bowling more fuller, like a good length, kind of 7 meters ish would be about the area. And now, obviously, you've got the threat of 2 bouncers as a batter. I think it keeps you guessing a lot more. And I think good length has been more successful this year in the IPL because the 2 bouncer rule at least keeps batters guessing as to whether you're going to bowl that or the second bouncer, for example. So you can go bouncer, but you never could do that before. Whereas like now, you might not use the second bouncer, you might not use the first bouncer, but the batters know that you've got it in your armory and they can't predict what you're going to do so easily. So I think that, those good length power play bowlers have definitely got a lot more value now with these new rules.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, there's an argument with the impacts up in play that power play bowlers who regularly do take wickets are kind of even more valuable because the number of wickets you need to take to get to weaker batters is now greater. So if you are Trent Bolt, perhaps you are more valuable. But I don't know. I think I think I probably tend to your view. We had a couple of questions here as well, Dan. Moving on about the Chinnaswamy. So AD and Akuma, I'm combining your questions into one, but I want you to know that we did see both. If you're playing 8 games in the Chinnaswamy, which is not Chennai's, which is RCB's home ground, what should be the bowling strategy? Now, if you can answer this, Dan, you could become a very rich man. RCB have never quite cracked it. They've never quite cracked what the bowling strategy should be. I have a theory, but I'm interested in what you have to say.
Okay, so look, you're going to go for runs more likely at Chinnaswamy than the Chapok. I think we've said that already. We've used the example of 2 extremes. I can give you a basic answer very, very quickly. And if you're playing 8 games at Chinnaswamy, which obviously is your home venue, the bowling strategy probably at the auction shouldn't be spending 56 crore on 5 batters or batting all-rounders, which is 56% of your team budget on Faf, Virat, Dinesh Karthik, Glenn Maxwell, and Cameron Green. That's a lot of money that you can't spend on bowlers, or viable frontline bowlers at least. And I think that certainly at this stage of his career, at least, there's a very fair argument about whether Cameron Green is a frontline bowler in the IPL level. RCB at Chinnaswamy. I think first of all, you've got to have an elite leg spinner. I think that's a pretty much mandatory in the IPL, full stop. And they let one go. And the Sunrisers gratefully picked him up at a base price, and hopefully he'll play for them. So Hasaranga, I mean, how on earth you go from that to basically putting all of your chips into going all in on Kyle Sharma is pretty crazy. So you've got no proven spin, proven above average spin option to bowl in the middle overs, and that's a big problem to start with. And I think as well, you've got to have in the IPL, you've got to have good death bowlers, a lock death bowler. Jasprit Bumrah, if he bowled at Chinnaswamy, he'd still go for under nines at death. I'm pretty sure of that because he's just elite. But I listened to your pod the other day after the game one, and you sort of said about the law of Siraj, and I think that's a kind of it's inconsistency, isn't it? Really, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Al Joseph's got a lot of talent, but he's inconsistent. Reece Topley, who they have in their squad, is a good power play bowler, a very good power play bowler at death, perhaps a bit less so effective, and again is quite injury prone. Lockie Ferguson is not a death bowler. So actually, in terms of roster construction, have you got the skill sets nailed in your squad? Have you got the gun leg spinner? Have you got the lock death overs? Who can you rely on to bowl 4 overs at the death, game in, game out? And I think the successful teams generally do have that, and I'm not sure that RCB have ever had that really.
Yeah, I think your point about spinner's really the good one. I think when we've seen them be successful there's normally been a leg spinner in the mix, or just good spin bowlers in general. I mean, it would be a venue. It sounds counterintuitive, and I can see in a sense why they might be reluctant to do it. But to me, it looks like a venue where you should basically go all in on spin and sack off the seam bowling. I think it's basically too easy to pull and cut people who bowl short, even a little bit short, into the stands. They're playing on a really small ground, and they're playing at altitude, so the ball's going to go further naturally. And you've got guys bowling 85 miles an hour halfway down. It's going to be it's going to be a bloodbath. Yeah, it happens all the time as well. And the other thing with the higher the altitude, the less lateral movement you would expect to see. So things like swing should, from a physics perspective, be reduced because the ball can't grip the air in the way that it would at a lower altitude. And you kind of see that, don't you? Some grounds that are really close to the sea are notorious for, and consequentially sea level are notorious for swinging around. Bengaluru probably not one of those. So do something that will make a difference. Get one of the guys who will move the ball off the pitch. Like, lateral movement's really valuable in cricket, kind of regardless of the format. If you're not getting it in the air, think about where else you might get that from. I mean, the fact that they got rid of Hasaranga, and then before that, Yuzi Chahal as well.
Yeah, true.
Like, some really, really kind of questionable decision making. Dan,
really fair to challenge that.
Yeah. Ayat says, in an ideal world, would the Fizz, Mr. Fizzer, be worth 20 crore if he had full availability? And why do IPL franchises love Stark and Cummins so much? So it's sort of 2 questions in there. I'm going to answer the first one. I don't think the Fizz is ever going to be worth 20 crore. I think he's a good bowler, but I think we saw him bowl probably a top end spell for his talent in the opening match of the IPL, CSK v RCB, and that's great. But we'll also see him go around the park sometimes. And if you look at his 3 matches before that against against Sri Lanka in T20s, played against them, that kind of happened. So I think he's a good fit for the team, and I think he's a good fit for the Chepauk venue. But I don't think he's a 20 crore bowler. Why do franchises love Stark and Cummins so much, though, Dan? That's one for you to pick up.
Pass. I suppose, like you could look at it from the perspective of FOMO, I suppose, to some degree, fear of missing out, because like these players are not always available in the IPL, and I think sometimes they become more valuable in their absence than when they play. And actually, I think if they play a full season this year and they don't get retained, I think we'll see a lower valuation quite considerably in mega auction. Obviously with the mega auction dynamics, but also because they've kind of shown that they're not elite T20 bowlers. I think that they're okay. Jack, you talked a lot about Cummins, I think, and we spoke about that on Twitter yesterday in terms of how difficult it is to justify that purchase for SRH and how it fits into the 4 overseas and their domestic balance and over usage and stuff like that. And yeah, that's a major issue. Stark just hasn't really played. I mean, neither of them played domestically at all in T20, like very, very rarely. And they just play for Australia. And actually, I'm not even sure that their international performances have really marked them out as an elite T20 bowler. And T20 is a format generally. I face the players all the time, and they acknowledge it. They know this. Don't get me wrong. They know this. This is a format that you have to evolve in consistently. And if you stand still for 1 year, you're falling behind considerably. And I know bowlers who have said to me that they stood still for a year and they felt that they were running on treacle basically like the year after. They couldn't, they felt really ill prepared for it. So imagine how not playing franchise league for the best part of a decade feels. That's what Mitchell Stark has got part with.
Yeah, I thought it's worth. I actually thought he bowled okay and got Heinrich Klaasened a little bit on Sunday. So I'm interested to see how he goes through the rest of the tournament. But it's a big bet that KKR have made on his performance. So yeah, I like big bets. I'm interested to see how that pans out. Walter says, how do you compare different bowlers across tournaments, taking into account the various types of surfaces that will impact a player? How do you know whether he'll transfer successfully, Dan?
Well, it's a great question from Walter, but one I'm going to have to at least kind of not go into too much detail with, because it's something that I work on a lot, sort of privately, and I've got models that take into account this kind of stuff and metrics that definitely take into this kind of stuff as well. And I think that most teams don't have that. So I think that actually this is close to being the holy grail for player recruitment, is to understand the differences in one league to the other and how that translates into expected success. I don't think teams do that.
I think yeah, go on.
So we go back to for example, the Big Bash. I refer to this a lot because I think it's an outlier in terms of the lower scoring nature of that tournament compared to other leagues. And actually, what we do see now, we see consistent overrating of Australian bowlers because teams aren't taking into account the conditions in those venues. And it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say that IPL level, you could probably throw between 1 and 1.5 runs and over onto a Big Bash bowler's economy, and that'll be about right in terms of expected economy. And going back again to the Australian argument about Stark and Cummins briefly as well, I think that also the fact that there are so many coaches in the IPL that have been who've got some kind of link to Australia means, and I think that as a coaching unit, they kind of often can be questioned to overvaluing their own as well. I think that also has an impact on the pricing.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. You sort of touched on a couple of things there, and I think obviously you can't talk about them, but two things that maybe you could do is apply an adjustment number. So if you know that a player has played in a certain country, or if you wanted to go more granular than that, on certain pitches and against certain opposition, you could moderate their economy rate or their average by multiplying that by 1.22 and adjust it up to give you an indication. Another thing that we see in some other sports, but I don't necessarily hear loads about in cricket, is mapping the careers of players that you can bucket as similar and seeing how those similar players do. And that, as a combination of those two things will give you a good indication. So if you know that the tall fast bowler who bowls 85 to 90 miles an hour, can't swing the ball, but can bowl a good wobble ball, compares quite well with a player you're looking at to recruit, and you know that they played in the BBL, and you know that they played in the IPL, and you know that their BBL stats are similar, you can make a projection there probably fairly that their IPL stats might end up similar as well. And that's another way that you could do it, I think.
Fantastic point. And that's also something that I do a lot of as well. And to be fair, I mean, that's when I first started doing it, which was quite a long time ago, I hadn't even thought of that at that point. And a coach taught me about that, about asking. He basically set me the challenge to do that type of thing. And I did it, and it worked really well.
Yeah. You can also do that as well if you want to, just on that point, on player similarity. It's one of the things people do for age curves. So there's a general age curve in cricket, and in any sport, but that will be slightly different depending on like your body size or your skill set and whatever it is, maybe your handedness. I've seen some research that suggests that left-handed batters drop off a little bit quicker than right-handed batters. Don't know why that would necessarily be, but it's a thing. And if you do this and you can compare players, so there's an overweight left-handed batter who declined quite quickly after the age of 29, and you have an overweight left-handed batter as someone that you might recruit who is 29, you might think, not going to take that risk because look what happened to this other guy. You'd want a bigger sample size than just one and another, but they're things you can think about.
For my village cricket career was anything to go by, I was an overweight right-hander and I declined pretty quickly.
Razzie says, which bowler is more effective in T20? One who goes for 4 overs, no maidens, 20 for none, or one who bowls 4 overs, no maidens, 40 for 3? So 40 runs and 3 wickets, or 20 runs and no wickets, Dan? What are you taking?
I think that it's not an either-or question to answer here. Actually, both players are extremely valuable for different reasons, and a lot of it will also depend on the phases that they bowl in as well. So, for example, yesterday we saw in the GT match, Saika Shaw and Rashid Khan combined to really, I think, lock the middle overs down, and then that 17th over that Rashid Khan bowled, I felt really tipped the balance in their favour in terms of giving them something to defend in the last 3 overs. And then kind of Spencer Johnson come along, and he was the kind of, paraphrasing the question, like the 3 for 40 guy who finished the game off at the back end. And actually, you probably need a couple of these guys in conjunction with each other to be effective. Maybe the 3 for 40 guy takes a bit more glory, but the 0 for 20 guy has set up with an assist that probably isn't often acknowledged. Look, there will be an exact value if we're looking at it in kind of numerical terms as to which one is slightly more valuable than the other. But I think we're splitting hairs a lot of it. They're both extremely valuable, and both of them have roles and teams to play. You can't have a team full of 3 for 40 guys, because you're going to get a very volatile team that's one day going to roll teams for like 120, and then another day can see 220 and get smashed. Whereas you can't have a team of defensive non-wicket takers, because then teams will just attack you at the back last 6 overs, for example, because they've got loads of wickets in hand. So I think that there's levels to it, and levels that probably you could write a whole article about, probably. and it probably would actually be really interesting to do that. But yeah, I think both of them are valuable. Both of them are quite phase dependent, and both of them probably work in conjunction with each other.
Pravet says teams might be. So I've copied that one down wrong, so I'll get the right thing up. But I'll go back to a random cricket stats question, and I'll find that one. He says, what effect do elite level proven bowlers like Bumrah or Rashid Khan have on other bowlers? Would you be more cautious about recruiting bowlers who play alongside them?
That's a really, really good question, and something that I've thought about a lot actually in the past. Now, before we go on to the sort of the cricket argument for that, I want to go through to the football argument. And actually, is this? So we know that there are teams who are much more analytically driven than others in football. We've got, for example, the notable ones in the Premier League would be like Brighton and Brentford. So when you sell a player and you're one of those two teams, are they less likely to do well at the other team because they've been kind of picked to play a specific role for the team that they're playing already, and are also probably sort of coached and informed rather differently with different insights than they would get at another team? And also, would a manager of those teams do as well at another team because their recruitment is basically handled by rocket scientists, and that can make a massive impact on their success or failure? So I'm not convinced. I mean, you look at someone like Caicedo at Chelsea, for example. Other teams are interested in him as well. He's not done anything really since he left Brighton on huge money. Will a De Zerbi as a coach be as effective at a top 5 team compared to what he is at Brighton when he's got goodness knows what support in the recruitment market? So these are all questions that you can relate from one sport to the other. In cricket, now, wow, I agree completely with what I think Brandon Cricket Stats is saying about Bumrah and Rashid. We saw yesterday. I don't think Spencer Johnson has that death over without the assist from Rashid Khan in the 17th over. Bumrah as well. Look, certainly in terms of wicket taking, I think it will flatter their teammates because teams often play out guys like Bumrah and Rashid Khan, and then therefore are forced to take on their teammates. And I think that creates more volatility for their teammates. Probably gives them more chance of taking wickets, but also perhaps more chance of leaking runs as well. So yeah, there's definitely, I think, an extra layer involved in that in terms of the assists that these world-class bowlers provide, and not having them in your team, but then recruiting one of their teammates probably should be something that you consider.
Yeah. Last question of the show then. Prabhat, I've got your the question up properly this time. I've always felt balance is being prioritised to an absurd extent over quality. For instance, teams will be looking for a left-arm pacer and might often pay 12 crore for the 5th best option, rather than 5 crore for a right-arm guy who is way better and can also bat. Do you agree or disagree, Dan?
100% agree. I've talked about the left-arm tax for quite a long time, and it comes from teams being inflexible and probably overvaluing the extent of variety in their bowling attack. So they're like, right, we need a left armour. We have to have a left armour, and having a must-have in an auction environment probably isn't a great strategy. We've talked about that before, one of the previous episodes. And look, it's a thing. It definitely exists. This left arm, what I call left arm tax, and also I would say that exists for left hand batters to a lesser extent as well, but still is present. And I'm always minded to pick what I say the better bowler. Like I'm not paying more money for a worse bowler just because they bowl left arm. For me, that's doesn't make any sense. And obviously in the question as well, we talked about batting ability as well. So you've got a right armour who's way better and can bat and going for less money than a left arm. I mean, that makes no sense at all. And actually, I think coaches are starting to come around to this view a bit. So I think maybe we might see the left arm tax dwindle a little bit in future years. And now we're talking about, they are asking who's the best player.
Yeah, fair. I suppose there's a role element to this as well, though, isn't there? Like, if you pick a guy who is the 5th best option at the auction, but he complements the bowling of the other 4 guys in your attack, either because he bowls at the death, or he bowls in the power play, or he bowls in the middle overs, and that means one of the other 4 guys gets to bowl, or 2 of the other 4 guys get to bowl their overs when they're at their strongest.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to view it from that perspective as well. So I think the lefty-righty thing I'm on board with, but like I think so Sunrisers this year are kind of a good example of this, aren't they? They bought Pat Cummins, who kind of, is okay. He's not an awful bowler. He's an okay bowler in a particular role. But because they've got him, they can't really play Umran Malik, because they bowl and they're only usable or they're only going to be average or above average bowlers bowling the same overs. So that means that they have to kind of pick somebody else who might not be as good an option, and the whole bowling attack is kind of a little bit worse. Whereas if they'd gone for, that's the line of thinking anyway.
Yeah, for sure. That's and how players kind of complement each other, I think, is also is so important. It really, really is. And understanding which players give benefits to their teammates as well, and make sure that everyone in your squad is kind of recruited and playing in a role where their super strengths can be displayed, I think is really, really important. And like you say, having Cummins does kind of constrain Umran Malik a little bit. And I mean, him and Prithvi Shaw and I'm trying to think of a couple of others now as well, would fit probably need a new franchise as a fresh start 11 right now in the IPL.
Cool. Dan, we're going to wrap up there. Just a reminder to everyone who's been listening, please do click like and subscribe to help us grow our audience and keep us trending in the right direction. If you've got the time as well, leaving a review would be really handy, because that gives us cachet in the podcast world. And a big thank you to everyone for listening. Dan, any final words from you?
No, just thank you so much again for all your questions and for listening and support. We really do appreciate everything, all the questions and all the kind words. Make sure you, as Jack says, you like, subscribe, you review, you ask questions, you leave comments. Look, if you listen on Spotify, even watch the video on YouTube on mute in the background just to give us another click and another please. No, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
See you next week. Bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.